we have been debating, since it's a slow part of the year, we just finished the trade deadline, so there's really not a whole lot of drama in any sport for another month. So when we think about it, we think about home field advantage. And we've been thinking about, where is home field advantage the greatest? And our friend Andrew believes that is in football. I tend to think it's in basketball. And obviously the least important home field advantage is in baseball.
You
for
think
hockey.
Basketball has the biggest home field advantage?
Are you kidding?
Out of any sport?
Have you seen the record at Duke University at Cameron Indoor? Have you seen what they're posting over there at the Dean Dome in North Carolina? I mean, even UCLA is not terrific, but they got a pretty good home field court advantage.
Yeah, to a certain degree. I don't know. I think you could, for some of that kind of stuff. I mean, you're talking about college-age kids, which is different than a professional level.
That's true. Okay, so then let's bring up the NBA. Have you seen how good the Lakers were at home this year? Did you see how the Cleveland Cavs only lost one game that really counted? They lost two, but they really lost only one game that counted at home the whole year.
Uh-huh.
I mean, there had to be some kind of home court advantage for them to win that many games at home.
I'm not saying that there isn't a home field advantage, but what I am saying is that I think, personal opinion, by far, football has the greatest home field out of any sport. Because, you have to put this in context a little bit. We were talking about this because we were watching the Giants. We were talking about the Giants earlier, the San Francisco Giants, baseball, and how they are just absolutely atrocious on the road. They're like 12 games under 500 now on the road. But at home, they're brilliant. They play awesome at home. And I'm sitting here wondering, how can this be? How can one team be so... with baseball, where the home field advantage, I think, is fairly minimal compared to, particular other sports. I think basketball, you're going to have a better home field advantage than you are in baseball, But I just don't get it. I mean, what's the big deal with playing road games in baseball? I mean, if you have a long road trip, I understand. If you're at the end of a 2-week road trip, yeah, you're probably worn out. You're going from hotel to hotel. You want to get home. Yeah, there's something to that. But game in and game out, I just don't understand it. Basketball has a home field advantage, and maybe means a few points, but I don't think by any stretch of the imagination, it's like basketball has this tremendous home court advantage that you just can't overcome or anything like that. Football, to me, has a very big home field advantage with how loud those stadiums get for a team that's trying to play offense, trying to call audibles, how many penalties do we see from road teams by false starts? Those types. Those are penalties created by crowd noise.
Yeah, okay, let's address these points one by one. First, to the point that baseball has one of the least home field advantages in sports.
Baseball is just ridiculous.
This is really true. This is true. And for further evidence of that, just look at what happened this year in the World Series and in prior years. You had the Tampa Bay Rays with the home field advantage. The AL's had the home field advantage every year, almost the whole decade. And how many have they won? Not all of them. And maybe not even half. The NL's won half of the World Series in the last 6-7 years. So you can't say that its home field advantage is a big deal in baseball. It really isn't. If you're good, you're good. If you got good starters, you're going to win games more often than you're not. It's pretty simple. Yes, some teams are better at home than on the road, but overall, it doesn't really affect a whole lot as far as the playoff picture. So you're right. It doesn't make a lot of sense. Second point. Basketball versus football. Well, let's get into this a little bit. Yes, I do understand that the NFL, that in college football especially. See, college football, I understand because it is very intimidating to play in places like the SEC. It's intimidating, yes, to play in the Big Ten, and it's certainly intimidating to play at the Coliseum with all the history and the columns and all that. No question about it.
And the columns. The columns. You got to watch out for those columns. You can see the people at Stanford going, all right, guys, we're going down to USC this weekend. Look out for the columns.
Well, there's a lot of aura there in USC, but it just gives you an idea. There's a lot of home field advantage to be considered in college football.
Well, before we get into college, I'll say this. Any being at home versus being on the road in college is just bigger and a greater thing because you're on college. You're in college.
Right, because the players are more affected by it. They're younger, they're more impressionable.
The players are kids.
Yeah.
They're kids. These are guys who a lot of times when they're traveling to these places, this is the first time they've ever been to some of these places ever, or they're taking plane flights that are the longest plane flights they've ever been on. A lot of these kids, probably don't travel or go very far when they're really young. So jumping on a plane and flying out to Notre Dame, and then going there and then having to deal with the jet lag and all those types of things. It's just being younger. I don't know. I think, you're more impressionable. Yeah, I think, I just think in general, it's going to affect you more because you're out of your element. But when you're a professional, when you do this year in and year out and you're going to these places, there should be some sort of comfort level that you've obtained by that.
Absolutely. And so
it's a different animal.
It's a different animal. And I think, so let's just divide this into two parts. College sports and pro sports. Because in college sports...
That's a good way to divide it.
It really needs to be divided because when we brought this up off air, I thought you were talking about the pros, and you're saying football is a better home field advantage. Are you kidding me? It's got the least home field advantage of any sport. Except
football?
Absolutely.
No.
Absolutely, it's got the least home field advantage.
Absolutely not.
Are you kidding? I mean,
Dave, I'm going to punch you right in the neck.
You have to be, no way. Listen,
no.
Lambeau Field. How much of a home field advantage was it 2 years ago in the Ice Bowl 2 when they went to overtime? Who won the game?
Giants won the game.
Giants won the game, and they're on the road, and that home field advantage apparently wasn't that great.
Not that teams that play.
I'll give you other examples.
Well, no, you could give examples. I can give you an example of how teams in the NBA Finals and the NBA playoffs went on the road and won.
When was the last time that happened? The team that had the home.
Didn't the Lakers win in Orlando?
Yeah, but they had the home court advantage in that series.
That doesn't matter. They won in Orlando.
But they did it, didn't they?
But they won in Orlando. They didn't win one game in Orlando.
It helps that they knew that Game 6 and 7 would have been in LA, doesn't it?
No.
Yes.
Knowing that Game 6 or 7 is going to be in LA doesn't do anything.
The Lakers are an interesting case because the Lakers could have won anywhere that year.
See, now he's like, oh, now it's an exception. That doesn't count. You can't bring that up. That's against my argument.
But listen. If Games 1 and 2 were not in LA, don't you think the story would have been a little different?
Well, I don't know. I mean, listen.
I think it would have played out a little differently.
Well, hold on. Didn't the Lakers win 2 games in Orlando? It's not that they won 1 game in Orlando. Didn't they win freaking 2 games in Orlando?
Yeah, but it was
but
it was precipitated by the 2 wins in LA, wasn't it?
I don't think any of those things have anything to do with the other.
But they started the series in Los Angeles.
They did start the series in LA.
That makes a big difference. What happened if in 2008 the NBA Finals started in LA instead of Boston? It could have been a different story.
But they won 2 games in Orlando. So how much of a home field advantage was it, or a home court advantage, for Orlando, who ends up losing 2 out of 3 games at their stadium? How much of an advantage is that?
Yeah, of course it ended up that way, but it helped that they can't start off to a 2-0 lead.
Dave, you could just say, Andrew, you know what? You're right. You could just say that, Dave. You don't have to keep arguing once you've lost.
I refuse to say that because I know I am correct.
Didn't the Nuggets go in and beat the Lakers in L.A.?
They did.
And didn't the Lakers go in and beat the Denver Nuggets in Denver?
But didn't it help that games 1 and 2 were played in Los Angeles?
I guess it helps.
It would have helped.
I don't know. I mean, when you're playing a single game, does it really matter? In Game 5, when you're in the middle of Game 5, does it really matter what happened in Game 1 in that particular moment in that game? No. It matters for the series, but it doesn't matter for that moment. It doesn't, because you lost Game 1 doesn't affect your performance in Game 5.
I don't know, Andrew. You got to look at this. I mean, the Lakers was the best team.
Dave,
the Lakers were the best team in the
Dave,
NBA that year.
Just look at me. I'm here now. I'm not on the phone. You just look at me and say, Andrew, you're so right.
You know what? But look.
And yeah, you could come up with examples in the NFL where teams have lost home games and playoff games.
I can give more of those examples in the NFL.
Sure, but I mean, when you look at the
Dolphins had a home game this year. Who beat them?
The Ravens.
Oh yes, didn't they? Were they the road team?
Yeah.
Well, how about that? They were.
And who beat the Ravens in the AFC Championship game?
Steelers did.
And who was at home?
I thought it was Pittsburgh, but I guess it was.
It was Pittsburgh.
Well, then you're trying to prove your point, aren't you?
And then who won the NFC Championship game?
Well, but the Eagles were.
And who was at home?
Arizona was at home for that one.
Yeah, Dave. I mean, I can pull up examples.
But who beat the Giants at the Meadowlands the week before?
The Eagles.
The Eagles. And who was at home? Who was on the road that year? The Giants were. I mean, the Eagles were.
Right.
And who beat the Panthers when they with their home game, and they didn't just beat them; they killed
The Cardinals.
them. The Cardinals, and where were they?
Yeah, I think
On the road.
I think you can come
On
up.
the road.
I think you can come up with examples of both. I certainly, and like I said, I don't think that NBA. I mean, I think that there's a good deal of comfort. I think that's the biggest thing when you're talking
Yeah.
about going.
I think
but
so.
in terms of a home field advantage, I still think by far football, college or pro, either one, is by far it's the most difficult. You're going to arenas and stadiums that have 70,000. In college, you're going to some of these places that have 100,000. How many people fill the Lakers Staples Center? 15, maybe most.
20,000, but
20,000.
yeah, 18,997.
Multiply that
whatever.
by 3 or 4 or 5. And you're telling me that that's not something that's
yeah,
intimidating?
okay, but
or-
that's not. But it's 3 or 4 or 5 with an open air stadium.
Well, what if
too.
you're playing at the Colts' new stadium that's closed, or
Well,
their old
that's
stadium,
but
Or
they
you're
are the
playing in
smallest
Minnesota.
stadium in the NFL.
or you're
and-
playing at Kansas City, that's an outdoor stadium, but one of the loudest.
Kansas
stadiums in the league.
City's used for so many years. They've
Or if
had
you're
one of the
playing in
greatest
Seattle,
home. Well, Seattle's a good case. See, those are
Yeah.
true court field advantages, but those are exceptions and not the rule. You're
Well,
saying in general, the whole thing.
in
is,
general, it's very difficult to win on the road.
I
in
know
football.
that the Raiders have the reputation of having a great home field advantage. They don't. That's overrated.
well, the
The
problem
Chargers
is
certainly don't have a great home
the
field
Raiders
advantage.
team suck.
And the Broncos' home field advantage, I think, is good, but I think the thing with them is just really weird.
Used to be better.
It used to be. Well, it's still
At,
pretty
well,
good.
at Mile High, used to
When
be
was the
better.
last time that the Broncos were out and out under 500? They have not been, actually.
Under 500 at home?
Well, at all. I mean, they're home. They are really good at home. They've always been. So that's actually an example of a good home field.
You know who has the
advantage.
worst home field advantage in football?
Well, let me think this over. It's got to be Jacksonville because they're
Jacksonville's
stadium-
pretty bad.
Yeah,
I would stay in Florida and go down south a little bit.
Miami.
Miami.
Yeah, it's really bad.
Miami's horrible.
Really bad.
How many old people live in Miami?
Well, yeah, I mean that's one thing, and just the fact is, it's the weather doesn't really support them being that. Yeah, no, you're right.
Miami's horrible. home
It's
field.
really bad. And
Miami
they're
would be better
such-
off playing on the road. There's an exception to the rule
They
right
could
there.
be because they are so good in September. It's really weird, and the more the season progresses, the worse they play. And it's been the strangest thing for years. And they really haven't been that good. I guess you could say Marino, but really since the Don Shula and Bob Greasy era, like way back in the 70s. You know,
Well, Dave, I mean, that
Larry
was a good
Zonker
conversation. We'll just,
Mercury
I guess we'll
Morris
just agree to disagree on that, unless you want
Well,
to.
I'm telling you, man, I really don't think that. I mean, look, there are some examples of very good home field advantage, but I think the whole thing is kind of overrated.
In football, you're crazy. You're a crazy person.